Extract from the Diary of Tordrad, Day 34. Today was best day for a long time. Avalanche has returned to me, like a brother to me, and now he found me. Must have wandered a long way. Perhaps it is our blood bond that tells him where I am. I am gladdened, whatever it may be. I did not want to have to buy another horse. Not when one had chosen me all those years ago. 7 years ago. Tordrad rode ahead of a column of winged lancers. This was a normal patrol for his unit. They had spent several days on the lookout for signs of any chaos incursions. Activity on the borders had increased. Clearly something had been stirring the tribes up. The night had set in, and Morslieb crudely shone with a dark green light, as if mocking them, as the riders made their way towards the nearest stanitsa to take shelter. At that moment, the normally cold weather changed in an instant to that of something even colder. The suddenness of it was clear as Tordrad's horse Avalanche breathed a great gout of steam suddenly, looking every bit like a dragon in miniature. The blaring of a horn caught the Rota's attention as they turned to face the sound. On a great snow dune some distance away was a score of Chaos Marauder horsemen. As these men of primitive battle urges charged down towards Tordrad's cavalry unit from all around, the eyes of man and beast glowed the same green colour as the moon. In retaliation, Tordrad let out a cry to his men in their native tongue. "Fall back together! Don't let them flank us! Then we crush them!" As he said this, one of the lancers was hit in the chest with a throwing axe, and a wall of flame erupted from the ground around the rest before they could turn their horses around to find better positioning. Realizing there was no way out, Tordrad swore under his breath and brought his lance to bear as his men formed up behind him for a countercharge that met the marauders head-on. His lance struck true against the metal shoulder plate of the chieftain as it sent a spark on contact, the force of the blow dismounting the foe from the horse. Tordrad was forced to quickly raise his shield to block a flail that had been aimed perfectly to crush his skull. Quickly turning the weapon's directional velocity aside before dropping his lance onto the firm ground below them as he lashed out at the marauder with his scimitar, taking off one of the man's arms. He lost concentration on the man's screaming as a loud roaring distracted him. He turned to look in the direction of the sound, to find a sight that made his heart beat ever faster in sensation in his ears and throat. The marauder chieftain had almost fully finished a transformation process. His body had torn and contorted out of all human recognition until the creature he stared at looked like a cross between man and beast. He recognized the signs of a mutation, the creature before him now being half human, half saber-tusk. The terrible fusion of dangerous foes tore the Kislevites' mounts apart, with their riders still upon them, falling from their steeds, littering the ground in confusion, fear in their eyes. These men were prone to the attacks of the mounted horsemen, who unrelentingly continued their attacks from the saddle. Tordrad's mind raced. He started to consider whether or not now would be the time to unleash that which he kept inside, that which he feared to let out. He feared that were he to let it loose, it may keep him on the outside forever, changing him irrevocably, terribly. Before he could decide, though, a sudden flail blow struck him in the back of the head. His helm absorbed the brunt of it, but he was rendered from consciousness as the sound of his men screaming from the ring of fire closing in rang in his ears for mere moments. 8 minutes later, Avalanche's mind calmed a little more as he sensed the enemies had lost his trail. His wounds were deep, but were not serious enough to threaten his life, for his body was powerful. He was a horse of great size. His rider, Tordrad, was still unconscious, laying forward in the saddle across Avalanche's thick mane. The horse had bolted past the marauders who had attacked its side viciously. The blood from Tordrad's head wound mingled with that of the horse's cut on its neck. Avalanche had jumped the narrowing ring of fire before it was too late, evading the dark sorcerer's incantation by a small miracle. His hooves were burned, though, but survival had been more important than the pain. For the rest of the night he bore Tordrad upon his own wounded body, making sure to keep moving but decreasing in pace as the bleeding wounds took their toll on his stamina. Eventually he had brought them to safety, as the first rays of the morning sun began to protrude across the flat horizon here. The Stanitsa came into sight. Guards spotted them and ran out to help. 7 years forward once more. On day 35 the group came upon a clearing. Already Dieter's senses were alert. The others noticed. He went as far as to raise a hand for the others to remain where they were. Tordrad placed a reassuring hand on his horse, which remained quiet too. All eyes followed Dieter's gaze. In between the green of the protruding bushes, they could make out the huge crude stone atop a massive grassy mound covered in skulls and other items that looked like offerings. Maestro and Tobias recognized it as a herdstone. Beside it, standing on guard duty but facing away from the group's position, stood a great hulking brute of a creature, humanoid in shape, but far more terrible than even a beastman. A minotaur stood on guard. Its garb was red, and it wore the symbol of corn on its loincloth, front and rear. It held a massive brass great axe, far heavier than anything a human could wield. The creature's horns were blood-soaked, left stained from whatever battle had bloodied them last. Dieter crept forwards slowly. The others waited. While he was turned away from them, he incanted something quietly under his breath. Suddenly it was clear to at least him that with each careful tread on the ground he made absolutely no sound whatsoever. Silently, Dieter approached the monstrous beast from behind. He made good time coming up to it. The others looked on in wonder at why it hadn't noticed his presence, for he was now directly behind the Minotaur. He brought his machete low and under the body. He spoke a spell as quietly as he could, and electricity crackled through the weapon. The creature had heard that, though, and turned its head sideways to see where the sound was coming from. It was too late, though. Dieter reacted immediately. Jumping with a stab maneuver, the machete blade dug through the creature's neck, partially damaging the nerves in its body. The electricity pumping through the blade singed its skin. It was dug in so deep that the machete was unrecoverable for the moment. It spun around, and Dieter used the opportunity to strike it about the face with his stave. He pulled back at once, and Olga charged in with a leap, just missing the creature's throat. It tore a chunk of flesh from its chest instead before being thrown off by the maddening beast. The beat of hooves coming at it told the Minotaur that it was going to be in trouble without help. It grasped for the great horn it wore around its neck and made ready to blow it. Before it could, though, Tordrad's mount had drawn him level with the creature, and his sword lashed out, striking 2 fingers from the Minotaur's hand and cutting through the black chain that held it in place. The horn fell to the ground. It roared in defiance and struck out at Tordrad, who was no longer there. He had circled around it to the other side, lashing out with his blade as he went. Vicious cuts, littering the creature's upper body all the way around it, but still it did not fall. Tobias was wearing the leather outfit. The sun was no longer in the sky. Like a shadow of the night itself, the halfling bounded into the back of the creature's legs, stabbing it with a small blade as he made contact. It knocked the thing forwards, making it lean over to not lose its balance. Dieter snarled and jump-kicked, launching himself from the stave. His foot met the embedded machete and drove it in deeper. With a froth of blood erupting from its mouth, the Minotaur collapsed in surprise. Tobias was all over the creature, stabbing it and dodging away deftly. Tordrad drove his axe through the beast from high above on horseback, and it fell instantly silent. Dieter recovered the machete and held it low while Ulger licked it, cleaning it for his master without even needing to be commanded. The others looked at this strangely. The dog had been acting in a surprising manner during his ownership to Dieter.